Utah is vast deserts that hum, mountains that echo, and canyons that seem to remember the people who walked into them and never returned. Across this landscape, patterns have begun to surface. Vanishings tied not by geography, but by rhythm sounds too low to hear, lights that follow silently, and camps that reappear where no one should be. Hikers, miners, researchers, even rangers, all swallowed by places that don't forget. Some leave traces burned into rock or sand, others leave nothing but silence. The wilderness isn't empty, it listens. These stories are drawn from official records, radio logs, and the voices of those who went looking. Each case leads deeper into the same question: what is out there? Moving in the quiet, shaping sound and light into something that hunts unseen. Stay close, keep your lights steady. Join us as we explore what's hunting people in Utah's wilderness. The Scream at Aspen Hollow. In the foothills of the Uinta Mountains, 30 miles east of Kamas, Utah, lies a place locals call Aspen Hollow. It's not marked on any official map. The dirt road leading to it ends without warning, swallowed by brush and loose rock. For most travelers, it looks like nothing, just another narrow canyon where wind moves through trees and no sound carries far. But for searchers who came here in the summer of 1998, it became the site of one of Utah's strangest wilderness cases. On the 12th of June 1998, 27-year-old hiker Thomas Hale set out from Soapstone Basin with his dog, Bramble. He told his co-workers at the Salt Lake City print shop that he planned to camp overnight, explore a drainage he'd marked on a Forest Service map, and return the next evening. Hale was known as careful and methodical. He packed a small tent, radio, and trail rations. Weather was clear. Temperatures at elevation were mild. He signed his name in the registry at the trailhead around 9:42 a.m. By the next morning, a Forest Service ranger noted that Hale's truck was still parked at the same spot. By late afternoon, when Hale's family called to report him overdue, a search began. Rangers expected an injury, a wrong turn, something ordinary. What they found instead were fragments, camp remains torn apart, claw marks on the tent poles, and a dog leash coiled neatly beside a cold fire. Bramble, the shepherd mix, was missing. Deputy reports described the scene with deliberate language. Tent staked, 2 poles bent inward, ground disturbed, prints indeterminate. The soil there is thin and gritty, not ideal for clear tracks. Still, investigators recorded something unusual. About 30 feet from the tent, in a patch of loose ash and pine needles, were 3 deep impressions too wide for deer, too far apart for bear, each roughly oval, about 11 inches long, as though something heavy had pressed down and vanished back into the trees. No human footprints led toward them or away. 2 searchers later told reporters they heard what they described as a long, metallic scream echoing across the drainage just before nightfall on the second day. One of them, Eric Dalton, said it reminded him of brakes tearing steel. The other refused to elaborate. The official report listed it simply as unidentified noise, 21:13 hours. The following morning, Hale's dog was found 3 miles downslope, standing on a ridge overlooking a ravine. It was shaking, muzzle cut, and its collar missing. The animal wouldn't let anyone approach for nearly an hour. When rangers finally reached it, they noticed something lodged in the fur at the base of its neck, a small splinter of grey rock, like shale, but magnetized. The sample was bagged and later logged in evidence. Laboratory notes only state composition anomalous, no known match in regional samples. Beyond that, there was nothing. No body, no clothing, no pack, no trail of movement. Planes from the Civil Air Patrol circled for 2 days. Heat-seeking scans picked up nothing. Weather stayed clear. Search dogs lost scent less than half a mile from the campsite, near a stand of quaking aspen where bark scars curved upward as though something had been dragged along them at height. Photographs exist, filed in the Summit County Archive, showing parallel gouges about 8 feet from the ground. The angle suggests pressure, not carving. Locals remember that summer well. They tell stories about strange animal noises in the Uinta's half-whistle, half-shriek, usually dismissed as cougars or elk. But the record for that week notes no cougar sightings, and game wardens reported silence across the valley. Hunters later revisiting Aspen Hollow claimed their radios went dead near the ridge where the dog was found. Compass needles drifted a few degrees west before stabilizing again downhill. On June 20, the search was suspended. Deputies logged 87 man-hours, 2 helicopters, and 30 volunteers. The final entry in the file reads, "No additional evidence. Subject presumed deceased, cause undetermined." In 2003, a hiker named Laura Pennington discovered a tangle of nylon cord protruding from mud near the same drainage. It was the same brand Hale had been known to use for tie-downs. The cord showed no weathering consistent with 5 years outdoors. It looked newer, as though it had been buried shallow and uncovered by runoff. Rangers collected it, but could not connect it conclusively. Hale's family identified the pattern, but not the serial stamp. 5 years later, in 2008, a backcountry crew cutting fire breaks along Soapstone Ridge reported hearing what they called a prolonged human scream carried on wind from the direction of Aspen Hollow. They radioed base, no one else heard it. The log entry, written by Foreman J. Sullivan, notes simply, "Sound repeated twice, duration 6 seconds, direction Knee Canyon, source unknown." By then, the case had entered local folklore. Hikers called the place the hollow that calls back. Online forums shared claims of motion sensors triggered with nothing on film, of wildlife cameras showing only streaks of light. Amateur groups brought magnetometers and EMF meters, noting spikes near the aspen stand where bark scars still showed faint grey residue. None of that made it into official reports. Today, Aspen Hollow remains seldom visited. The old Forest Service sign has fallen. Brush covers the last 100 yards of track. The tent poles from the 1,998 site are gone removed or buried under seasonal slides, but the clearing still feels wrong to those who go. In 2021, a new team of volunteers conducted a memorial sweep for missing persons in the Uinta Wilderness. When they reached that basin, GPS readings flickered, logging multiple coordinates for a single point. They wrote in their report, "Readings inconsistent device looped between positions." Thomas Hale's name sits among Utah's unsolved backcountry disappearances. Official cause? Unknown. The magnetized rock fragment is still listed as evidence number 18, 1347A, sealed in a clear vial. No subsequent tests have matched it to any mining residue or meteor sample in the region. At dusk, the light in that canyon turns metallic, the same shade described by searchers who heard the scream. Wind moves through the aspen leaves, and the sound, from a distance, mimics breath or words drawn out by the trees themselves. Some rangers still avoid that route after dark. They say radios hiss there even on clear nights, and the air feels heavier, as if something unseen still watches from between the trunks. Nothing else has been taken from Aspen Hollow since 1998. Nothing, at least, that anyone has found. The shape in Blind Creek. In the summer of 2006, Blind Creek Canyon in northeastern Utah was not a place many people visited. It sits inside the Ashley National Forest, west of Flaming Gorge, where narrow ravines cut through walls of red shale and the sound of water travels unevenly, sometimes echoing from directions that make no sense. Rangers say it's one of those areas where voices return, distorted as if the canyon itself repeats what it hears. On July 17, 3 friends, Mark Redding, Lisa Carter, and Daniel Ochoa, drove up from Vernal to camp near the creek's upper bend. They arrived just before sundown, pitched 2 tents beside a low bank, and noted the stillness of the air. No wind, no birds. Carter later wrote in her journal, "The place is wrong. Sound doesn't move here." The line was recorded days later by investigators after her notebook was found at the campsite. They started a fire, cooked a small meal, and sat quietly as the night deepened. According to Redding's later statement, they began hearing soft splashes in the creek, spaced evenly, like footsteps in water. Ochoa shone a flashlight toward the noise, but the beam struck only mist. When they called out, the splashing stopped. 10 minutes later, a stone landed near their fire. They thought it had rolled from the slope above, then another fell closer. They left the fire burning high that night. By morning, 1 tent was slashed down the middle. The cut was clean, the nylon curling inward. Inside, Carter's pack was undisturbed, but her sleeping bag was missing. Redding found it 30 feet away near the creek, laid flat as if someone had climbed out and left it. There were prints in the silt nearby, long, shallow impressions, more like knee marks than feet, spaced irregularly. He told rangers later, "It looked like something crawled." At 10 a.m., the group packed in silence. They hiked 3 miles back toward the logging road, but never reached it together. Redding said that while crossing a dry wash, Ochoa stopped and looked uphill, saying he'd seen a figure standing among the junipers. He described it as thin, tall, and folded wrong. Then he walked toward it, Redding and Carter called after him. He didn't answer. When they followed the slope, they found only broken twigs and a dark patch on the soil that looked wet but wasn't. By nightfall, they reached the ranger station at Sheep Creek. Redding filed a missing person report. Rangers began searching at dawn. They found the campsite intact, the fire pit cold, and the remains of footprints leading both upstream and across the dry wash where Okoa vanished. The ground there is hard shale mixed with sand. Prints don't hold shape well, but trackers marked a series of deep triangular impressions, alternating irregularly, each about 8 inches across, sunken as though from something heavy, pressing unevenly. Search logs from July 19 list no signs of struggle, no clothing, no animal tracks consistent with attack. Helicopters scanned thermal signatures, nothing unusual. The only heat trace detected on the first day was a single warm spot near the upper ridge, recorded at 9:42 p.m., lasting 12 seconds before fading. When rangers reached the coordinates the next morning, they found scorched brush in a perfect circle, less than 4 feet wide. The soil there tested slightly magnetic. Witness accounts from nearby camps added to the confusion. A pair of fishermen at the reservoir reported seeing lights moving across the ridge that same night, not flashlight beams, but steady glows. Another camper described hearing a human voice imitating an owl. Investigators noted these statements, but attributed them to echo or nerves. 3 days into the search, Carter left her tent pitched near the ranger base, insisting she'd heard someone calling her name from the canyon. She walked back toward Blind Creek at dusk, ignoring warnings to wait for escort. Her footprints were later found following the main path for nearly 2 miles, then splitting abruptly into the brush. Her flashlight was discovered wedged upright between stones beside the creek, still on. No other trace of her was recovered. By July 25, only Redding remained of the original trio. He stayed through the last official day of search operations. Rangers recorded his final interview. "It moves between trees when you don't look at it. It bends light, like heat shimmer. You think you see it? Then it's behind you." They classified his statement as psychological distress brought on by exposure and grief. The official report lists 2 missing persons, presumed deceased. Searchers logged 71 square miles of coverage, including creek beds, cliffs, and sinkholes. No remains were found. A year later, in August 2007, a team from the Utah Geological Survey entered the canyon to map subsurface fractures. Near the old campsite, they found a circular depression 12 feet wide, where vegetation had died in a spiral pattern. Their instruments recorded brief compass interference 6 degrees deviation before stabilizing again beyond the creek. The survey's internal memo described it as localized magnetic anomaly, transient, non-geological. Local law enforcement revisited the site in 2014 after a hunter reported hearing cries near the same area. Deputies hiked in, recorded environmental readings, and camped overnight. At 2:13 a.m., one officer noted that his body camera picked up a faint shape moving at the edge of the light. The image shows only blur, grey vertical distortion between 2 junipers. The footage was reviewed and stored under Case 1477B. Blind Creek is now closed to camping after dusk. The Forest Service Bulletin cites unexplained environmental hazards. Hikers still pass nearby, though most do not linger. In the dry wash where Okoa disappeared, vegetation grows differently greyish leaves, thin stems, brittle even in spring. Rangers mark the area with orange tape every few months. The tape vanishes without trace. Those who visit say sound behaves strangely there. Voices echo before they speak. Stones dropped into the creek take too long to splash. Some say they've heard footsteps that sync perfectly with their own, half a second delayed. No bodies were ever recovered. The 2 missing campers remain on Utah's database. The anomaly at Blind Creek has never been identified. The case sits in archives labeled Incident Unresolved, 2 Missing, Evidence Magnetic, Possible Environmental. The last note, added in 2019 by an anonymous ranger, reads only, "Noise last heard 0400 hours. Same pitch as before. Area avoided." The canyon remains empty now, except for the wind that bends around its walls in slow, circular gusts. It sounds almost like breathing. The camp beside Mirror Lake. In early September of 2011, Mirror Lake was calm and cold, the surface so still that it reflected the mountains around it like polished glass. Situated along Highway 150 inches, the Uinta Mountains, The lake draws anglers every season, people who come for its trout, its peace, and its predictable quiet. That quiet changed on the night of September 9, when 3 campers vanished without leaving a single trail of movement, and their campfire continued burning until dawn. The group Nathan Crow, aged 34, his younger brother Jared, and their friend Eric Barlow had arrived at the lake on a Friday afternoon. They rented a small aluminium fishing boat from the lodge, bought 2 days' worth of supplies, and set up camp near the southern shore. Weather records from the Utah Department of Natural Resources described that weekend as clear, windless, with temperatures hovering just above freezing after sunset. That evening, other campers saw their fire glowing bright across the lake. Witnesses reported hearing music or radio playing softly, maybe from a phone speaker. Around 10:30 p.m., one fisherman in a nearby cabin claimed he heard 3 voices shouting, followed by a splash. He assumed someone had fallen into the water. No further noises followed. The next morning, at approximately 6:45 a.m., a ranger on patrol noticed an empty boat drifting in the lake. It floated evenly, oars inside, one line still hanging in the water. When pulled to shore, the ranger found 2 fishing poles, a thermos, and a small digital camera wrapped in a plastic bag. The boat's registration matched Crow's rental from the lodge the day before. When rangers reached the campsite, they found the tent standing, fire still smouldering, and food laid out for breakfast. No sign of struggle, no scattered items. 3 sleeping bags were missing. On the ground near the fire, they noted a faint ring of moisture, forming an almost perfect circle, 2 feet wide, its edges steaming in the cold air, as if freshly boiled. Samples were taken. No clear chemical traces were identified. The memory card in the recovered camera contained 15 photos. The first 10 were ordinary: landscapes, fish, smiling faces. The last 5, all taken between 10:18 and 10:21 p.m., are blurred. Investigators noted streaks of light reflected off the water and a pale, vertical shape standing behind the men, in one frame human-like, but faint, like a reflection where no one stood. The next image shows only ripples, as if something entered the lake. The final shot captures the campfire, flames bending sharply sideways, though no wind was recorded. Divers began searching that afternoon. The water was clear to a depth of 12 feet, then clouded by silt. They found nothing: no clothing, no equipment, no bodies. Sonar scans over the following week revealed no anomalies on the lake bed. Dogs brought to the shoreline picked up scent only around the immediate camp area, losing it at the water's edge. Rangers interviewed nearby campers. One man from Heber City stated that just after midnight, his car alarm triggered on its own. When he stepped outside, he saw ripples spreading outward from the center of the lake, though no wind disturbed the trees. Another camper described a low humming that vibrated through the ground. The sound, according to his statement, stopped exactly when his flashlight flickered and died. By September 14, the official search expanded across both shores. Drones scanned tree lines. Helicopters traced the highway corridor for miles. Still nothing. The case was labeled "Missing Water Presumed." But within weeks, the story of the photographs began circulating online. Copies leaked from an unknown source. Viewers pointed out details the report had not mentioned: a faint line extending from the reflection in the water toward the camera lens, and what some claimed were hand-like shapes near the surface. The Utah Department of Public Safety later clarified that digital artifacts were likely caused by water vapor or motion blur. Yet, the original memory card remains sealed under evidence tag ML1109, and its images have never been officially re-released. In 2013, 2 hikers exploring near the North Inlet found a half-buried sleeping bag covered in silt. The tag matched one sold at a Vernal outdoor store, the same brand purchased by the Crow brothers. Tests confirmed it had been submerged for years. No other remains accompanied it. The find reignited interest in the case, but no progress followed. Locals who fish the lake still talk about what happens there on windless nights. They say that when the air drops below 40 degrees, a faint mist forms even without temperature contrast, hovering only above the southern shore. From within it, faint ripples appear, moving outward, though nothing touches the surface. In 2017, a tourist recorded a short video showing a sudden depression in the lake, as if something heavy sank instantly beneath the surface. When slowed down, the frame shows the reflection of a figure leaning forward at the water's edge, though no one was visible on shore. The video was analyzed by the Utah Office of Recreation and dismissed as digital noise. Still, the ranger station received over 30 calls that month reporting the same phenomenon, concentric ripples forming at dusk with no apparent source. In 2022, the Utah Division of State Parks quietly issued a night restriction for private boats on Mirror Lake, citing unverified disturbances after sunset. The restriction remains in place. Campers can stay overnight, but are advised not to enter the water after dark. The official file on the missing anglers closes with the same note repeated in earlier wilderness cases. No conclusive evidence of foul play. Conditions stable. Weather normal. Environment unchanged. Yet rangers still speak of nights when the lake appears to move before the wind does ripples forming in perfect rhythm, as if responding to footsteps unseen. The campsite near the southern shore is still used. It looks ordinary. Flat ground, fire ring, space for 3 tents. But if you stand there long enough after sunset, the water stops reflecting your shape. For a few seconds, the surface becomes flat again, mirror-like, and what stares back from it isn't always your own face. The silence on Buckskin Ridge. The Uinta Basin stretches wide and empty, its ridgelines shaped by wind and centuries of erosion. To the east, near the boundary between Duchesne and Uinta counties, Buckskin Ridge rises low, but sharp, an uneven spine of limestone, juniper, and shale. It is not far from the old sheep grazing routes that were abandoned in the 1972nd, and in 2014 it became the center of a search that remains one of the strangest incidents ever documented by Utah's volunteer rescue units. On September 18 of that year, 2 hikers from Provo, Michael Grant, age 36, and his cousin Aaron Pierce, age 32, set out to traverse a section of the ridge rarely walked. They were experienced outdoorsmen carrying GPS units, radios, and topographic maps. Both men had logged trips across the Uintas and San Rafael Swell. They were expected back by nightfall. At 8:22 p.m., the last transmission from their radio logged into the regional repeater. It contained no words, only static, followed by 3 bursts of tone, the kind used in handheld radio ping tests. The log shows no subsequent traffic from their unit. When they failed to return by morning, a search was organized from the Buckskin staging site near 9 Mile Road. Teams followed their recorded route through low scrub and stone, locating boot prints and tire marks from their pickup. About 4 miles along the ridge, the prints split. One pair veered toward the western slope, the other continued north. It was there, according to ranger notes, that the search team first heard the voice. At 10:43 a.m., a volunteer named Jeff Alvarez radioed base. "We have a male voice on Channel 2 reading numbers, possible survivor." The numbers repeated at 15-second intervals, 14.29, 14.29. The voice was faint but distinct. When base attempted to reply, the voice overlapped their transmission identical tone, identical pitch, then cut out. Technicians later confirmed the frequency was 151.625 MHz, a secure channel reserved for internal coordination. None of the missing men's radios were programmed to transmit there. By afternoon, the voice returned twice more. The team logged its signal strength increasing the deeper they went into the western ravine, yet their instruments recorded no active transmitter nearby. The terrain there is narrow, enclosed by 200-foot walls of sedimentary rock. Echo patterns are unpredictable, radio waves scatter and loop. But the repetition of the coordinates was exact, the intervals timed to the second. Searchers reached the ravine floor and found the remains of a small camp, a fire pit half filled with dust, 1 boot, and a crushed metal thermos. The thermos bore Grant's initials. The fire pit's edges were lined with stones, one of which appeared partially melted, fused, smooth as glass. Photographs taken that day show it clearly, labelled Object 7A Heat Deformation. No ordinary campfire could reach such temperatures. The following morning, a helicopter survey spotted a torn piece of bright orange fabric tangled in branches 60 feet up a pine tree near the ridge crest. Climbers retrieved it. It was part of a backpack flap, scorched and brittle. Tests showed no sign of accelerant, only extreme localized heat exposure. Meanwhile, back at the base, radio operators monitoring all bands recorded a direct call at 2:11 a.m. The message lasted 4 seconds. Don't follow the sound. The signal strength matched that of the missing men's handsets, but triangulation placed it from within a 2-mile radius of where the searchers already were. The voice, later compared digitally, matched that of Michael Grant, taken from a voicemail provided by his wife. Over the next 48 hours, The voice repeated sporadically, sometimes whispering fragments of their own radio codes, sometimes nothing but a faint exhale. Each time a rescue team tried to trace it, interference spiked and equipment malfunctioned. GPS units reset, compasses spun half a turn, and batteries drained within minutes. Reports from 3 separate teams note identical failures in the same half-mile stretch of canyon. When the search ended 10 days later, nothing further was found, only the boot, the thermos, the melted stone, and the burnt fabric. The official report, filed under case BR 1419, lists presumed lost, terrain, and exposure. No official mention of radio interference appears in the summary. However, the raw communication logs remain archived in Dutchine County's emergency services records. Spectrographic analysis performed by a state technician in 2015 indicated that the radio bursts were not reflections or feedback. They contained unique audio signatures inconsistent with echo. The source appeared to move each successive call, shifting several hundred meters, following the same path as the searchers themselves. Years later, hikers occasionally report hearing faint numbers through their handheld radios when approaching Buckskin Ridge, usually late in the day, always the same string. 14.29. Geologists say it could be interference from old mining relay stations or weather instruments, but the frequency assigned to those installations was decommissioned in 1987. In 2019, 2 amateur radio operators from Roosevelt conducted an independent test. They transmitted low-power pings from the ridge base and received a return transmission 2 minutes later on a channel they hadn't used, containing their own signal, reversed and slowed by half. Buckskin Ridge remains open to hikers, though few go far beyond the tree line. Rangers advise travelers to avoid bringing handheld radios, claiming they cause confusion during storms. But locals still tell stories of the ridge that speaks back, of a voice that reads coordinates to no one, of numbers that repeat without end, and of a silence between transmissions that feels like it's listening. The missing men's truck was found a week later, ignition off, keys still in place. The odometer showed an extra 11 miles unaccounted for, as if someone had driven it during the night and returned it quietly before dawn. Their radios were never recovered. The light over Dry Fork Canyon. Dry Fork Canyon lies northwest of Vernal, Utah, a long cut of sandstone and sagebrush that looks quiet even on the brightest day. By night, the place turns darker than most deserts. A valley where the Milky Way seems close enough to touch, and sound carries for miles. The locals know its bends and switchbacks, the way the wind hums through the fences, and the silence that comes when it stops. In the late summer of 2016, that silence was broken by a column of light that appeared again and again, always at the same hour, always in the same part of the canyon. The first report came on August 11. 2 residents from Dry Fork Road, Howard and Marie Ellis, told the Uintah County Sheriff's Department that they saw a white beam, almost solid, extending from the sky to the canyon floor. It lasted about 12 seconds, then went dark. They assumed it was a searchlight or aircraft flare, but no flights were recorded that night. When the same light appeared the following evening, they decided to drive closer. On August 13, around 9 p.m., the couple left their home in a grey Ford pickup and headed toward the canyon. The temperature was 70 degrees, the sky clear, no moon. They carried a camera, a pair of binoculars, and a handheld Jeep. Neighbors later said they saw the truck pass the last house before the ridge at 9:14 p.m. 15 minutes later, the vehicle was found idling on the roadside. The headlights pointed toward an empty field. The doors were open. No one was inside. Deputies arrived before midnight. The truck's interior lights were still on, the engine warm. Marie's purse was on the passenger seat, her driver's license and phone inside. Howard's wallet remained in the console. The camera lay on the dashboard, lens cap removed but no images recorded. The SD card had been wiped. The Jeep was turned off, its log cleared. The truck's radio displayed frozen static even after the engine was cut. Search teams fanned out through the field using floodlights and night vision gear. The ground was hard-packed dust. Footprints would have shown easily, but none appeared. At the far end of the field, deputies noted a pale ring about 6 feet wide, lighter than the surrounding soil, as though exposed to intense heat. The plants around its edge were brittle, grey and dry, yet no sign of fire or smoke damage existed beyond the boundary. When the sheriff's department expanded the search the next morning, they brought in volunteers and a helicopter from Roosevelt. The aircraft flew grid patterns over the canyon for 3 hours. At 10:17 a.m., the pilot reported a circular reflection from the canyon floor visible for only a few seconds before vanishing. Coordinates were marked, and a team on the ground was sent to investigate. They found only a smooth depression in the sandstone, about 3 feet across, where the rock looked polished, as if melted and cooled again. The official report, filed under case DF16211, lists both residents as missing. The time of disappearance is estimated between 9:20 and 9:35 p.m. No sign of struggle, no tire tracks beyond the original route. That week, other residents began reporting the same light. One man camping near the canyon's mouth said it appeared suddenly at 9:24 p.m., a vertical beam that made no sound, brighter than any flashlight, but without a defined source. He described it as flat white, not glowing, just there. Another witness, a ranch hand tending irrigation valves farther south, told deputies that when the beam appeared, every dog in the valley started barking, then went silent at once. On August 15, a group of university students conducting a geology survey in the area recorded a brief anomaly on their instruments, a spike in electromagnetic readings lasting 12 seconds, coinciding exactly with the time the light was reported. Their data logs showed localized interference confined to a radius of less than 100 meters, with a consistent frequency of 19.6 Hz, a value later cross-referenced against seismic sensors, which showed no corresponding movement. In the days that followed, investigators returned to the couple's truck. The onboard computer, when inspected by technicians, showed that all data logs, trip distance, fuel usage, even the digital clock had reset to 0 at 9:26 p.m. The vehicle's battery tested normal. The ignition switch showed no sign of tampering. By early September, the case drew attention from both local media and amateur investigators. Photos circulated online showing the barren ring in the field and the melted depression in the canyon. Skeptics suggested lightning strikes or illegal testing equipment. The National Weather Service confirmed no storms had occurred within 80 miles that night. Hill Air Force Base reported no operations in the region. In October, a rancher discovered a pair of binoculars in a dry creek bed near the canyon. The lenses were intact, the strap torn. The model matched the set purchased by the Ellises earlier that year. No fingerprints were recoverable. The creek bed itself was untraveled, its surface smooth from rain. The binoculars appeared to have been dropped from above. They left a narrow gouge where they struck the earth. In 2018, 2 years after the disappearance, a wildlife camera placed by researchers captured a short video sequence near the same canyon wall. At exactly 9:25 p.m., a sudden bloom of light illuminated the slope for roughly 10 seconds. The footage shows nothing descending, only the landscape turning white, then black again. When the frames were enhanced, faint silhouettes appeared at the edge of the ring, 2 figures, motionless, indistinct. The footage was later analyzed by the Utah Geological Survey and archived. Its authenticity was confirmed, though its cause remains unknown. Since 2019, the site where the truck was found has been fenced off by the county, signs warn of unstable ground. At night, residents still report the occasional glow deep within the canyon, sometimes reflected faintly against the clouds. No new disappearances have been recorded there, though the air monitors installed after 2020 occasionally register sudden drops in pressure without explanation. The last entry in the sheriff's file was added in 2021 by Deputy Susan Renner. Area inspected 2,100 hours. Air still. Static heard briefly on patrol radio, same as original incident. No light observed. The canyon remains silent most nights now, but when fog settles low, the valley glows faintly light with no source, lasting only as long as a held breath, vanishing before anyone can take a single photograph. The man who walked out of the desert. In late May of 2018, a man was found wandering barefoot along State Route 24, about 30 miles southeast of Hanksville, Utah. He was sunburned, dehydrated, and walking in deliberate circles on the asphalt shoulder. When the first passerby stopped, the man said nothing. He only pointed towards the horizon and whispered it wasn't supposed to end. His name, as deputies would later confirm, was Christopher Lang, age 41, a software technician from Moab who had gone missing 3 days earlier in the San Rafael Desert. Lang had left his home on May 19 to photograph petroglyphs in the Horseshoe Canyon district. His friends said he was experienced in desert hiking, accustomed to heat, and always carried redundant gear. GPS logs from his vehicle showed that he parked near an unmarked service track at 9:12 a.m. and set off north on foot. The temperature that day reached 94 degrees Fahrenheit. By 3 p.m., his phone had recorded a dozen photographs of rocks, brush and one wide panorama of empty sand. After that, the data stops. When search teams began looking for him on May 22, they found his vehicle exactly where he'd left it. Keys on the seat, half a bottle of water inside. Footprints led out for about half a mile before fading into the hardpan. Rangers assumed he had become lost, but the tracks, when measured, showed a consistent bearing, almost perfectly straight, pointing toward a patch of open desert with no landmarks at all. 3 days later, Lang reappeared on the highway, 9 miles from his car, his skin blistered and eyes bloodshot. He was taken to a hospital in Green River, where his condition stabilized within a day. What puzzled doctors was his memory. He could describe his departure clearly, his equipment, the heat, but nothing after noon on May 19. His last recollection was of hearing a low hum like an engine inside the ground. Then nothing. Investigators retrieved his Jeep's unit from his backpack, which had been found 2 miles from the car, neatly placed beside a line of small stones. The unit's log showed that after noon on the 19th, Lang walked in wide loops around a single point for nearly 40 hours. Each loop grew smaller until it formed a pattern of 5 concentric circles, the last only 30 feet across. At the center, the coordinates recorded were 38.5951 degrees north, 110.4913 degrees west. An empty stretch of desert with no vegetation, no rock formations, and no elevation change. Rangers visited the site 2 days later. They found nothing unusual, just a bare patch of ground about 12 feet wide, compacted as if pressed down by weight. The soil there was magnetized enough to interfere with their compasses. One ranger noted in his field report, metal needles drift 5 degrees east within circle. Outside boundary, normal. Samples sent to the Utah Geological Survey contained traces of melted quartz, an occurrence that usually requires extreme heat. Lang's physical state offered no simple explanation. He had minor burns on the soles of his feet, but no blisters, consistent with walking across sun-heated sand for days. His vital signs were stable. Dehydration levels suggested he had access to water until roughly 12 hours before he was found, yet no canteen or container was recovered. His skin showed fine particles embedded under the surface, silicate dust fused by heat. The pattern resembled exposure to plasma discharge, though the area showed no evidence of lightning. When asked about the circles in his Jeep, Lang denied walking them. "I was trying to go straight," he said during a recorded interview on May 26. "Every time I looked at the horizon, it moved. When pressed," he added, "it kept showing me the same hill, even when I turned around." His account remained consistent, though fragmented. He described a vibration under his feet, a faint blue light at ground level, and a sense that the air had thickened like water. Deputies who reviewed his GPS data later confirmed that the signal had glitched twice, showing him briefly transported 100 meters north before returning to the same spot seconds later. These anomalies did not match known satellite drift or atmospheric interference. The Utah Department of Public Safety classified the case as unexplained spatial disorientation. Privately, one investigator noted that Lang's movement pattern matched several older missing person reports from the San Rafael area cases, where hikers' tracks ended in similar circular formations, often around points where radio contact abruptly failed. Aerial photos taken the week after his recovery reveal faint discoloration in the sand where he walked, overlapping rings visible only at low sunlight angles, almost like the trace of shallow whirlwinds. Within weeks, wind erased them completely. Lang left Utah soon after, relocating to Oregon. In interviews conducted months later, he claimed to have recurring dreams of standing in an open plain with no sound except a distant hum. He said when he wakes, his phone compass shows a bearing of 118 degrees the same direction from his home to the spot where his Jeep's loops ended. In 2020, a team of geologists revisiting the San Rafael Desert recorded unexplained low-frequency vibrations near that same coordinate, lasting 4 minutes and measuring 19.5 Hz, the same reading detected at Dry Fork 4 years earlier. No further investigation was authorized. Today, the site lies unmarked, identical to the thousands of other stretches of sand around it. Travelers driving State Route 24 sometimes report seeing a man walking near mile marker 112 barefoot, head down, tracing a circle with his steps. When they stop to offer help, there's no one there, only a pattern in the sand that fades before the wind has time to shift it. The screams beneath fish springs. The Fish Springs National Wildlife Refuge sits in Utah's West Desert, 70 miles from the nearest town, and surrounded by salt flats that stretch until the horizon folds into haze. It is a place of marshes in the middle of emptiness, where brine water bubbles up from hidden aquifers and the wind whistles across plains of white crystal. Rangers there say that when the air is still, you can hear the earth itself breathing. But in 2019, the sound changed. The breath became something deeper, something rhythmic, patterned, and mechanical. The first recording came from a seismic monitor placed near the refuge's southern boundary. On March 17 at 2:08 a.m., the sensor captured a low-frequency pulse, repeating every 6 seconds for more than 2 minutes. The data was archived automatically and went unnoticed until a technician reviewing the files described it as too regular to be tectonic. He checked nearby instruments, none registered motion. The sound came from nowhere. Over the next month, locals began hearing it without equipment. A rancher named Jacob Price, who lived along the old Pony Express Road, told deputies he heard a deep rumble under the floor, like a jet far underground. His wife said the windows shook for a moment, then everything went silent. Others heard it 2 truckers passing through, a wildlife biologist on night survey, and 2 campers who described a voice without words echoing through the salt pans. By April, the refuge staff began keeping an informal log. The sounds returned roughly every 10 days, always between 2 and 3 a.m., always lasting 2 minutes. Each episode began with a sub-audible vibration that grew into a sequence of tones, 3 rising, 1 falling, then stopped completely. Equipment used to record bird calls picked up the pattern clearly. One microphone placed in a maintenance shed produced an image of the sound on its spectrogram. 4 precise vertical bands, evenly spaced, identical in each cycle. On April 29, 2 U.S. Geological Survey scientists visited the refuge to calibrate the sensors. They ran tests, confirmed no seismic movement, and ruled out groundwater resonance. One of them, Dr. Melissa Horn, later wrote in her field notes, "Source unknown. Frequency too consistent for natural origin. Fields generated." That same night, the sound returned but stronger. The on-site caretaker, who stayed in the small bunkhouse by the entrance road, reported that the ground seemed to lift beneath him in waves. His radio, left on the desk, emitted a low hum that rose in pitch with each vibration. He described it later. It was like something moving through the salt. You could feel it push under you, not across. When morning came, rangers inspecting the marsh noticed new fractures in the salt crust, long, straight lines, intersecting at perfect angles, as if drawn by machinery. The cracks were shallow, but extended for hundreds of feet. In the center of one, a small pool of brine had turned cloudy grey, surrounded by dead insects and fish. The seismic logs from that night show readings of 19.4 Hz, identical to the frequency recorded 2 years earlier at Dry Fork and the San Rafael Desert. The pulses formed a perfect pattern, 10 seconds apart, fading as they moved north toward the abandoned test range near Dugway. Theories began spreading. Some blamed mining operations, though none existed nearby. Others mentioned groundwater shifts, though geologists dismissed the idea no aquifer could vibrate with such precision. A retired Air Force technician who lived in Delta said the rhythm matched old bunker ventilation systems he'd once monitored. "It's air being moved by force," he said, "but there's no base out there now." In May, the refuge closed several observation roads after one cracked bridge support began resonating at night, shaking loose bolts despite calm weather. Maintenance crews replaced it, but the new bolts rusted within weeks, as if exposed to moisture heavier than air. Instruments placed nearby recorded sudden electromagnetic spikes at random intervals, enough to scramble data loggers for minutes at a time. On June 3, a wildlife photographer camping near the northern flats left his recorder running overnight. When he reviewed the audio, he found something new. Beneath the low hum was another tone-short bursts, resembling human breath drawn sharply inward. The spectrogram showed clear intervals: inhale, exhale, repeat. The pattern continued for 1 minute, then stopped abruptly, replaced by faint echoes of splashing water. The audio was analyzed by technicians in Salt Lake City, who found no distortion or editing. Their final note: unidentified biological or mechanical signal, amplitude decreasing toward end. By midsummer, the sounds ceased. Seismic monitors returned to normal. Rangers resumed night patrols. Yet several months later, hunters camping near the eastern boundary claimed to hear faint voices carried on the wind, as though someone were calling for help far underground. Deputies investigated, found no one, and wrote in their report, "Auditory illusion likely due to wind across flats." Still, the pattern remained. Every March since, at roughly the same time, the monitors at Fish Springs record brief fluctuations in frequency, always near 19.5 Hz, always lasting just long enough to be noticed. The last ranger to file a note about it was in 2022. His entry, scrawled in the margin of a maintenance log, reads, "Heard it again. Same interval. The ground feels hollow." To this day, the salt flats remain unbroken, except for those straight scars visible only from the air. They form no recognizable shape, no road, no trench, only lines converging on a shallow basin where the sound was loudest. The basin fills and empties with brine each year, but nothing grows there anymore. When the wind dies, the silence feels complete, but if you stand still, the earth beneath your feet seems to pulse slow, steady, and deep, like something alive breathing just below the crust. The vanishing climbers of Notch Peak. Rising more than 9,000 feet above Utah's West Desert, Notch Peak stands like a blade of limestone cutting through the sky. It's one of the tallest pure rock cliffs in North America, vertical for nearly half a mile, smooth and pale, with an echo that lingers long after sound should have faded. Climbers call it beautiful and dangerous, the kind of place where a single misstep becomes permanent. But what happened there in the spring of 2020 remains beyond any explanation offered by rangers or mountaineers. The two men who vanished were identified as brothers, Daniel and Mark Avery, ages 38 and 41, both experienced climbers from Cedar City. They arrived at the Sawtooth Canyon trailhead on May 2, checked in with the Bureau of Land Management ranger, and mentioned their plan to ascend the south face, a seldom climbed route known as the Pale Wall. Weather conditions were stable. The brothers carried 2 sets of ropes, a drone for documentation, and satellite communicators. At 10:12 a.m., they sent a text to their friend back home. Starting ascent, clear view, no wind. The last confirmed message came 6 hours later, transmitted at 4:18 p.m. Halfway up, seeing figures moving on wall above. Probably reflections. Will send drone. After that, nothing. When the pair failed to return by the following morning, rangers initiated a search. The Avery truck was found undisturbed at the trailhead, keys still inside, satellite unit left charging. Rangers began climbing the Pale Wall at dawn. At 600 feet, they found the first rope cut clean, not frayed. About 20 meters higher, another line was anchored securely to rock, but ended abruptly, the fibers sliced as if by a blade. No loose rock or fallen debris was found below. A rescue drone launched that afternoon captured a 12-second video near the upper ledge. It showed 2 shadow-like forms moving across the limestone face, though the camera was facing away from the sun. When analysed frame by frame, the shadows appeared independent of any physical source. One moved upward as the drone descended, the other flattened briefly, then vanished. The footage remains in the Millard County Archive, labelled No Problem 20117A. 3 days later, a second search team located the Avery's base gear near the summit ridge, 2 helmets, a half-empty thermos, and a camera bag. The camera inside contained 23 images, mostly of the climb. The last photograph, time-stamped 4:21 p.m., shows Daniel leaning against the cliff, looking upward. In the background, faint shapes appear along the rock wall, vertical distortions resembling silhouettes caught mid-motion, as though someone were walking within the stone itself. Experts who studied the photo said the effect could be heat shimmer or lens reflection. Yet the limestone temperature at that time of day measured 57 degrees Fahrenheit, too cool to cause optical distortion, and the image, when enhanced, shows the shadows cast at angles inconsistent with the sun's position. During the following week, search efforts expanded to cover the canyon floor and ridge crests. Helicopters with thermal imaging detected no heat signatures. Every night, at approximately 9:47 p.m., however, radio interference spiked across all frequencies used by the teams. The static came in short bursts, 3 seconds on, 1 off, repeating for several minutes before stopping. Equipment specialists described it as bandwidth cycling, a behavior typical of encrypted devices, but no such transmissions were authorized or known in that area. By May 12, the official search was suspended. The brothers were declared missing, yet the data from their own drone, recovered days later near the ridge, offered one more anomaly. Its internal flight log showed a 5-minute gap during which it had hovered in place, recording at 300 feet. The video during that time is blank grey static, but the audio channel captured a faint rhythmic clicking, increasing in speed before cutting off. In 2021, a private climbing group from Colorado attempted the same route. They reached the halfway ledge without incident, but later reported a sound like distant footsteps reverberating through the stone. Their lead climber wrote afterward, "The echo didn't match us. It was faster, coming closer each time we stopped." One of their helmets recorded a sudden pressure change. Barometric sensors dropped 8 millibars in less than 2 seconds, then returned to normal. Later that season, geologists surveying the area found a patch of limestone scorched black near the upper wall. The mark measured 6 feet across, perfectly round. No lightning strikes were reported, and the discoloration did not match chemical burns. Instruments placed nearby recorded faint magnetism again at 19.5 Hz, the same signature detected in previous Utah incidents. Locals who hike around Sawtooth Canyon claim strange behavior from sound at dusk. Voices echo twice, even when only one person speaks. Rockfall noises start and stop without debris. Some nights, a low metallic hum vibrates through the cliffs, audible for miles. In 2022, a group of climbers using a high-resolution drone filmed the pale wall at sunset. The footage shows shadows crossing the limestone 3 or 4 at once, though the area was otherwise empty. When the film was slowed down, the shadows appeared to move in sequence, each exactly 6 seconds apart, climbing the wall in rhythm with the fading light. No trace of the Avery brothers has ever been found. Their ropes, cut cleanly, remain sealed in evidence lockers. The official report attributes their disappearance to equipment failure and full bodies unrecovered. But among climbers, the legend of Notch Peak grew into something else, a warning told in quiet tones. Never climb there when your own shadow is visible on the wall. At sunset, those who stand at the trailhead sometimes see reflections shifting high on the cliff face, far above the reach of any human. They move slowly, deliberately, as if returning to the same ledges again and again, searching for a way down that no longer exists. The whistle at Red Hollow. Red Hollow Canyon sits east of Panguitch, Utah, a narrow scar in red sandstone, where wind rarely moves, and sound does not echo. Nothing grows there but sage and brittle grass, and at night, the air feels too heavy to breathe. In April 2021, 3 hikers camped in that hollow to photograph the desert sky. Their names were Emily Ward, 29, her brother Ryan, 32, and their friend Daniel Knox, 30. They expected 2 nights of stargazing. They never came back. The group left Salt Lake City on April 4, reaching the canyon near midnight. Their last message, sent at 10:40 p.m., read, "Camp set, clear view, no wind." The next day, families received no reply. When they were reported missing on April 9, rangers found their truck near the trailhead, keys inside, everything orderly. The campsite, a mile down the Dry Creek bed, was not. Their tent had been torn open from the inside. Its frame was bent outward, and the stakes lay scattered in a ring, as though pressure had forced its way out. Beneath the tent, the soil had melted into glass, smooth, circular, and perfectly symmetrical, 8 feet across. Around it, no burn marks, no ash, no footprints. The first thing investigators noticed was silence. Radios crackled with static. Phones lost signal. A melted smartphone was found half buried in sand, its memory card intact. Forensic analysts recovered 57 photographs and 1 audio file. The pictures were ordinary until the end landscapes, star trails, the tent lit from within. The final image, taken at 2:13 a.m., showed a faint arc of light above the ridge, curved like a bow. A thin column of dust rose from the canyon floor, lit from nowhere. The following audio, time-stamped 2:14 a.m., lasted exactly 43 seconds. It began with a low hum, then a high, pure whistle that split into 2 tones, oscillating 5 times per second before fading. In the last seconds came a short, heavy thud, followed by complete silence. Search teams spent 6 days combing the canyon. No human remains were found, no tracks, no clothing. Dogs refused to cross the glassy patch. Their handlers described them whining, claws scraping at the sand as if repelled by scentless air. Soil samples from the site showed fused silica and magnetic residue, consistent with exposure to heat over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Yet there was no sign of combustion or lightning strikes. Weather records for that night reported clear skies, no wind, temperature 43 degrees Fahrenheit. The sheriff's office filed the site description as unexplained surface vitrification, no ignition source. 2 witnesses miles away, camping near the valley rim, later told deputies they heard a train whistle at the same hour. there are no railways near Red Hollow. A rancher 5 miles south said his horses broke loose that night, running until dawn. Wildlife cameras on his property caught vertical streaks of light falling through the air at 2:15 a.m., evenly spaced like descending threads. On April 14, a team of geologists recorded faint magnetic pulses within the circle, repeating every few minutes, measured at 19.6 Hz, the same frequency noted in prior wilderness incidents at Fish Springs and Dry Fork. The pulsing lasted 1 day, then ceased. Emily's camera was recovered 30 yards from the camp, lens cracked. The final image showed the tent illuminated from within by a white light. The shadows cast outward evenly in every direction, as if from an expanding sphere. In the haze above the tent, faint filaments hung suspended, curved like strands of molten wire. By the time investigators returned a week later, the glass had cracked and lifted. Beneath it, the soil was grey and soft, rich with metallic particles. A radiation scan found nothing, but magnetometers drifted 4 degrees east whenever held over the center. The official report closed quietly. Exposure to unidentified environmental energy. Missing presumed deceased. 6 months later, researcher Lisa Morton visited the canyon alone. She brought recording equipment capable of detecting infrasound below human hearing. For 3 nights, nothing occurred. On the 4th, her recorder captured the same whistle, steady, measured, identical in pitch to the 2021 file. Her field notes mention feeling the air vibrate before sound reached her ears. "It began inside my chest," she wrote, "and moved outward." The recording ended when her instruments shut down abruptly. When analyzed at the University of Utah, her data revealed 2 tones 19.6 Hz and 39.2 Hz, forming a harmonic pattern typical of rotating machinery, not natural resonance. No aircraft, seismic activity, or radio interference was recorded anywhere near that valley. In 2022, ground-penetrating radar was used to examine the site. 6 feet beneath the surface, a reflective layer appeared, metallic in density, but without clear structure. When technicians returned a month later to sample it, the layer had shifted 20 feet east, leaving only normal sand below. Since then, Red Hollow has remained fenced off. Warning signs cite unstable ground and electromagnetic exposure. Still, visitors report the sound returning each spring. Residents in Panguitch say that when the wind blows from the east, a faint whistle rides it high, smooth, and too even to be natural. Those who've heard it describe chest pressure, dizziness, and static in their hair. In 2023, a patrol ranger inspecting the site noted something strange: small glass fragments forming new circles around the original one. His report ends, air dropped 4 degrees at 2:10 a.m. Whistle faint. Recorder failed. The site remains under restricted access, yet every year in early April, the same event repeats. The whistle rises once, steady and hollow, lasting 43 seconds exactly. When it stops, the desert feels different, the ground warmer, the air heavier, as if something vast has just passed through unseen and left only the echo of breath behind. Some believe it's seismic resonance or hidden machinery beneath the crust. Others say it's the earth itself, releasing a pressure we cannot measure. But those who have been near Red Hollow after dark insist the sound is not coming from underfoot, it moves above, circling in the air, searching for a place to land. And when it fades, the silence that follows feels alive, stretching wide across the canyon, waiting for the next night when the desert remembers to exhale. The cabin in Parawan Creek Canyon lies west of Cedar Breaks, where the hills flatten into pine and dust. The creek itself is seasonal dry for months, then suddenly alive after a storm. Most travelers pass it without noticing. But in early autumn 2022, a hunter named David Merrill followed the creek upstream while tracking deer and stumbled upon something no map recorded, a cabin that should not have been there. He found it just after dawn on October 6. The structure stood 30 yards off the creek, built from rough-hewn logs weathered grey. No path led to it, and no tire marks appeared in the mud. Merrill said it looked old but not ruined, as though someone had built it years ago and only just left. The door hung slightly open. Inside, everything smelled of cold wood and iron. On a small table sat a kerosene lamp, unlit but clean, a metal cup, and 3 notebooks stacked neatly beside each other. Their pages were filled with uniform handwriting in a language no one could recognize. The lines were evenly spaced, each beginning with a symbol that resembled a small circle with a line through it. Yet one phrase appeared again and again, written in English, every few pages. "Do not answer the knock." Merrill took one notebook and left. When he returned 2 days later with local deputies, the cabin was still there, but the table was bare. The other notebooks had vanished, and the lamp was gone. In the dust near the doorway, officers found a single boot print pointing outward, heel pressed deep, as if someone had been standing inside and then stepped away. The print was larger than Merrill's and measured a size that did not match his. The sheriff's office photographed the site and confirmed that no building permits had ever been issued for a cabin in that section of Parawan Creek. Aerial imagery from the Utah Geological Survey, taken in 2018, showed only trees and a washout where the cabin now stood. There was no foundation visible, no path, and no shadow. The notebook Merrill had taken was sent to a linguistics department at Southern Utah University. The paper was modern, ordinary notebook stock, but the writing instrument left faint metallic traces, not ink. The unidentified language ran left to right, repeating short groups of characters arranged in loops. A few scholars suggested it might be a cipher, but no pattern matched any known system. That winter, a graduate student named Laura Hastings began analyzing the repeated English phrase. On page 73, she noticed faint impressions beneath the writing, as though previous pages had been pressed hard with a pencil. When illuminated under raking light, they formed coordinates 37.819 degrees north, 112.858 degrees west, the exact location of the cabin. In January 2023, a ranger hiked there to check on snow levels. He reported finding only an empty clearing. The trees were undisturbed, and no debris indicated that a cabin had ever existed. The ranger's jeeps logged a mild magnetic deviation compass, drifted 15 degrees west, then returned to normal after he left the area. The notebook remains in evidence storage in Parawan. When officers photographed it under infrared light, new details appeared. Across the margins of several pages were fine, wavy lines resembling sound waves. When digitally enhanced, the lines formed regular patterns at 6-second intervals, identical spacing to the low-frequency vibrations recorded years earlier at Fish Springs and Red Hollow. In May 2023, a second hunter reported seeing a light through the trees near the same section of the creek. He described it as lantern-like, not moving. When deputies investigated, they found fresh tracks leading in a straight line toward where the cabin had once stood. The tracks stopped abruptly in soft soil, mid-stride, the last print partially formed, as if weight had lifted before the step completed. No further structure was ever found. However, trail cameras installed that month recorded 3 nights of unexplained motion. On the third night, at 2:43 a.m., one camera captured a frame showing the edge of a door, just the upper corner, swinging open in an otherwise empty clearing. The following frame, taken 2 seconds later, showed nothing. Theories emerged quickly. A temporary shelter built by hermits, an abandoned hunting blind, even deliberate hoax. But none explained how the building could vanish entirely without trace, or how the ground, photographed afterward, appeared flattened in a perfect rectangle, edges scorched a faint grey. By late 2023, the cabin's story had become a local legend. Some hikers claimed to hear knocking in the canyon after dark 3 slow raps, always from somewhere behind them, even when standing in open air. Others described finding shallow impressions in the mud, shaped like door frames lying flat on the ground. Rangers dismissed these reports, but they began carrying radios tuned to a private frequency when patrolling the area. In February 2024, a maintenance worker, reviewing surveillance data from Parawan Creek's remote monitoring station, noticed an anomaly. For 12 minutes, between 2:12 and 2:24 a.m., the infrared camera recorded a temperature increase of 8 degrees localized to the clearing. During that time, faint rhythmic impacts registered on the ground sensors, 3 knocks, each 6 seconds apart. That pattern, 3 knocks, 6-second intervals, matched the spacing found in the notebook's hidden wave markings. Today, the clearing still exists, unmarked and avoided. In daylight, it looks like any other patch of forest. At night, locals say the air changes there, colder, then warm again, like someone opening a door. The sound of water grows distant, and the wind seems to slow. If you stay long enough, you might hear it, 3 gentle knocks, always from behind, never from ahead. Rangers keep their distance. One described it simply in his 2025 log. Visited Parawan Creek site. Nothing visible. Ground faintly warm. Thought I heard tapping. Did not look back. The notebook sits locked in a drawer at the county office, sealed inside a glass case. The metallic writing still gleams faintly when touched by light. The English line "Do not answer." The knock repeats on page after page. The letters perfectly uniform, as though written by a hand that never tired and never stopped. The black figures of Soldier Summit. Soldier Summit rises high in the Wasatch Plateau, a cold and wind-bitten pass where snow lingers even into spring. The highway that crosses it, US. Route 6, connects Price to Spanish Fork through a steep series of turns, freight trains running parallel below. Truckers know it for its fog, its black ice, and its silence after midnight. Yet in 2023, a string of incidents turned the pass into something else, entirely a place people began to avoid, not for its danger, but for what appeared in the road when the weather turned cold and clear. The first report came on the 8th of January 2023. A long-haul driver named Samuel Ortiz radioed dispatch just after 3 a.m., saying he'd nearly clipped 3 people standing in the road. His dash camera, retrieved later, showed nothing. Only an empty lane, headlights bright in mist. Yet Ortiz insisted the figures were there, tall, motionless, and blacker than the night around them. He said they turned toward his truck just before vanishing. 2 nights later, a state snowplow operator called in a similar report from the same stretch of highway, near mile marker 211. He described seeing a line of dark shapes crossing left to right, all moving at the exact same speed. When he braked, they stopped too. When he stepped out of the cab, they were gone, but the air, he said, felt charged hair standing on his arms, sound gone flat, as if the mountain itself had paused. By February, 8 separate motorists had filed statements describing identical encounters. Some said the figures appeared standing in the fog. Others saw them reflected in headlights before they were visible on the road itself. None could describe faces. One woman said they looked like shadows cut out of the air. Utah Highway Patrol began reviewing traffic cameras along the Summit corridor. Most footage showed ordinary conditions, but on January 24 at 2:41 a.m., one east-facing camera froze for exactly 3 seconds. When playback resumed, 6 dark, vertical smudges appeared across the image, evenly spaced down the centerline. The next frame showed clear pavement. The recording was examined by technicians in Salt Lake City who confirmed no data loss or light malfunction. In early March, troopers installed temporary monitoring equipment, motion detectors, and infrared sensors on both sides of the pass. On March 6, the sensors triggered twice, 5 minutes apart. The first recorded a sudden drop in air temperature of 7 degrees. The second detected movement directly in the road, followed by complete signal blackout. When power restored, the only data stored was a burst of static at 19.6 Hz, the same frequency documented in other Utah wilderness cases. Residents of Helper, the nearest town, began reporting strange disturbances that month. Porch lights flickered in rhythm with passing freight trains, even though the power grid was stable. A local wrecker driver claimed to see tall shapes standing along the tracks as he drove back towards the summit, motionless, like burned silhouettes against the snow. On March 18, a crash drew renewed attention to the pass. A sedan traveling eastbound veered sharply and struck the guardrail. The driver, 27-year-old Leah Morgan, survived. She told troopers she'd swerved to avoid people in the lane. Her passenger insisted there had been no one there. The car's dash camera captured 3 frames of movement streaks, shaped roughly like limbs, before the lens went white. Investigators ruled it a sensor flare caused by headlights reflecting on fog crystals, though no fog was reported that night. 2 weeks later, a patrolman named Eric Porter conducted a solo night watch. He parked near the upper turnout and waited. At 2:17 a.m., his body camera recorded him stepping out of the car, looking down the slope, and saying softly, "There they are." The camera shakes as he turns his light toward the road. For half a second, 6 figures appear tall, thin, featureless, lined up at the edge of the pavement. Then the light cuts out. Porter radioed base immediately, voice shaking. "They were standing in front of me. No faces. They just looked." Backup arrived 15 minutes later. Porter was unharmed but disoriented. His watch had stopped at 2:18 a.m. The patrol vehicle's electronics were dead, though the battery tested fine. In April, Utah Department of Transportation crews, resurfacing the highway, found something unexpected beneath the asphalt near the upper curve. A patch of older concrete foundation, perfectly rectangular, stamped with letters barely visible, SS Barrack, 1900, and 17. Historians later confirmed that during World War I, a temporary army barracks had stood at Soldier Summit to house railway guards. It had burned down in 1919 after a kerosene stove explosion killed 6 men. No record of the barracks' precise location had survived until then. After the discovery, activity on the summit seemed to increase. Truckers reported seeing figures near the turnouts, sometimes in their mirrors, sometimes ahead on the road. Always the same. Black shapes, too tall to be human, vanishing before contact. One driver described his reflection disappearing entirely, while passing mile marker 212, his cab visible, his headlights bright, but his own silhouette missing from the glass. In June, state technicians retrieved a month's worth of infrared camera data. On multiple nights, the cameras picked up heat shadows, zones of cold, moving against the warmer air. The shapes were human-sized, but measured negative temperature gradients, as if they absorbed heat instead of giving it off. Local belief now links the phenomenon to the old barracks fire. Some say the figures are soldiers caught between storms, still guarding a pass that no longer needs guarding. Others point to the matching electromagnetic patterns that appear each time the same 19.5 Hz pulse recorded in other Utah anomalies. Whatever the cause, Highway Patrol now closes that section briefly during certain nights when heavy fog settles. A new sign stands at the west entrance to the summit. Caution reduced visibility zone. It says nothing about the figures. Motorists who cross after midnight sometimes claim to see them even when the road is dry. They move in groups of 6, evenly spaced, walking as though their feet make no contact with ground. They do not reflect in mirrors, and when passed, they vanish instantly, as though they were never there at all. Truckers keep a tradition now. They honk once when approaching the summit's peak. They say it's a salute to whatever walks there, a way of asking passage. Some claim the air grows lighter after the horn sounds, as if pressure itself lifts. Others report no change, only silence, thick and endless, and the uneasy feeling that something unseen is pacing the road beside them until dawn. The echoes at Desolation Canyon. Desolation Canyon stretches for nearly 90 miles along the Green River in eastern Utah, a corridor of sandstone walls and dry silence. It is among the most remote places in the continental United States. No roads, no power lines, only water and wind. The name came from early surveyors in 1869 who described it as a soundless place where one's voice disappears into the rock. For generations, rafters have floated the river for its isolation, but in recent years, they've begun to speak of something else, voices that do not belong to them. In May 2024, a group of 6 rafters launched from Sandwash for a week-long trip through the canyon. They carried cameras, GoPros, and 2 satellite communicators. On the 4th night, as they camped near Rock Creek, they heard what they described as a conversation upstream. The voices were low but distinct, 2 men, 1 woman, all speaking English. Yet the words were hard to make out. Assuming it was another group, they called out, but the voices stopped. Minutes later, the same phrases repeated, this time echoing from downstream. Their audio log captured what happened. The voices came in pairs, matching the rafters' speech seconds before they said it. When one of them whispered, "Did you hear that?" the echo answered, "Did you hear that?" slightly ahead of the original. The file runs for almost 3 minutes before the wind drowns it out. 2 members of the group turned back early. The others continued the descent. At Wire Fence Rapid, a GoPro left running on a helmet recorded something stranger, faint speech repeating the guide's instructions seconds before he gave them. The audio waveform shows overlapping voices identical in tone, with no evidence of manipulation. Experts later determined the recording was continuous and unedited. By late June, other rafting parties began reporting similar incidents. A family from Oregon said they heard someone laughing near their camp, though they were alone for 30 miles in every direction. Another group described a woman's voice calling names that matched their own: Tom, Sarah, Ben, each followed by a pause, as if waiting for an answer. The Bureau of Land Management initially attributed the reports to acoustic reflections caused by the canyon's shape. The sheer sandstone walls can bounce sound in unpredictable ways. Yet acoustic engineers, who visited in August 2024, found that the canyon's curvature should delay echoes, not anticipate them. No terrain feature can cause a reply before the initiating sound, one report concluded. In October, a river ranger reviewing old trip logs found a pattern. Incidents always occurred between river miles 68 and 74. near a bend locals call the Listening Wall. On maps, it's marked simply as a vertical cliff of Navajo sandstone rising 400 feet above the water. The surface bears smooth striations as though polished by hands, and at night it radiates heat long after the rest of the canyon cool. That same month, a research team from Utah State University set up sound equipment in the area. Over 4 nights, their recorders captured multiple anomalies, human-like voices, repeating phrases at intervals of 6 seconds. When analyzed, the echoes displayed inverted timing, appearing milliseconds before the trigger sound. The frequencies were narrow and consistent, centered at 19.6 Hz, the same subaudible tone registered in previous Utah wilderness events. On the 5th night, the researchers heard it themselves. One student said it felt as if her own thoughts were being spoken aloud by someone standing behind her. She described an overwhelming pressure in her chest, followed by nausea. Their instruments failed minutes later, and they abandoned the site before dawn. In November, a rafting company guide named Owen Keller disappeared while scouting the river alone. His raft was found drifting near 3 Canyon, gear intact, radio still on. The last transmission, recorded at 3:14 p.m., captured Keller's voice repeating a phrase, "I hear you, I hear you, I hear you." The signal ended abruptly. Searchers found no footprints, no sign of struggle, only drag marks near the waterline leading toward the cliff. The official report listed presumed drowning, but Keller's dry bag, recovered downstream, contained his jeep. The coordinates stopped exactly at the base of the Listening Wall. There, searchers discovered an unusual feature, a small alcove filled with standing water, no more than 5 feet deep, perfectly round, smooth to the touch. When struck with a paddle, the surface vibrated for almost 10 seconds before settling a resonance too long for water of that depth. Local rangers returned in early 2025 with hydrophones. They recorded faint rhythmic pulses echoing beneath the surface, short bursts, each 6 seconds apart, matching the pattern heard on Keller's final transmission. The frequency again measured at 19.6 Hz. Since then, rafters who pass through the canyon report a new habit. They speak softly or not at all. Some wear earplugs to muffle the returning words. One guide describes the effect as your own voice looping back through time. Another says that when he whispered his name, the rock whispered it back not later, but at the same moment, as if the canyon were already waiting for him to speak. The Bureau has since posted an advisory discouraging overnight camping near River Mile 70. The notice cites unexplained acoustic interference, yet those who drift through still talk about hearing conversations that never happened, and some claim to see movement on the canyon walls, shadows of people talking, mouths moving, but no sound following. A river ranger's log from June 2025 ends with a brief entry written in pencil. Echo responded before call, equipment fine, left area. Desolation Canyon remains open to rafters, but those who enter that stretch now carry a quiet rule. If the canyon repeats your words, you don't answer. You let the voice fade, because the ones who call back too long, the ones who try to speak with it, tend to vanish between the next bend and the next echo, swallowed by the silence that remembers what they were about to say. The vanishing miner of Gentry Mountain. Gentry Mountain rises west of Helper, Utah. Its slopes carved by decades of coal mining, its ridges hollowed by tunnels, long since collapsed. Most of the entrances were sealed by the 1,980 seconds after a string of cave-ins, but locals say the mountain still breathes. They mean it literally. On cold mornings, vapor drifts from cracks in the shale like exhaled air, carrying the faint scent of iron and sulfur. Hikers, who wander near the old mine mouths, sometimes say it sounds as if someone is still working down there, steady knocking, faint, rhythmic, impossible to locate. The legend of the vanishing miner began in 1998 when 2 spelunkers entered an unmarked shaft near Miller Creek Road. They descended 300 feet before finding a wall of debris blocking the tunnel. As they turned to leave, one reported hearing 3 slow taps on the rock, followed by a 4th from behind them. When they reached the surface, the knocking continued faintly through the ground. They did not return. For years, the story was dismissed as echo or shifting stone. Then, in March 2025, the sound came back, recorded this time. A hiker named Brian Larson, age 41, was mapping old mining trails for a conservation project. He carried a small camera and a field recorder clipped to his pack. On the morning of March 12, he parked near an overgrown service road and began following a dry ravine toward a collapsed portal known as Shaft 12. The footage he left behind, later recovered from his camera, shows him entering the site at 9:17 a.m. He narrates quietly, describing fallen beams and rusted rails. Wind gusts through the opening. Then, at the 9-minute mark, 3 clear knocks echo from inside metallic, even. Larson pauses, whispers, "Someone there?" and steps forward. The recording cuts out abruptly. His car was found later that evening, keys in the ignition. Search teams located his pack just inside the entrance, torn but intact. The camera's memory card was undamaged. The final image, taken seconds before the recording stopped, shows a dark passage leading into the rock. In the center of the frame, a human boot print appears pressed into fine grey dust. It faces forward, toward the wall, not back toward the light. Rescue crews entered the tunnel the next day. They found that same wall had shifted, cracked open just wide enough for a person to slip through. The passage beyond extended 20 feet, ending at solid stone. No signs of Larson. Ground-penetrating radar showed no cavity beyond that point. Geological surveys taken afterward recorded a low-frequency vibration emanating from the wall's steady pulses, spaced 6 seconds apart, faint but measurable. The frequency, once again, was 19.6 Hz. When recorded with contact microphones, the pattern resembled deliberate knocking. 3 beats, pause, then 1. Old mining logs reveal something peculiar. Shaft 12 had been closed after an explosion in 1923 that trapped 5 men underground. Rescue crews reached them 4 days later, finding all dead except one whose body was never recovered. His name was Henry Vale, a foreman noted for using that same knocking sequence, 3 short, 1 long, to signal safety from collapse. Newspaper archives describe Vale's disappearance as unsolved. Witnesses claim to have heard persistent tapping from sealed tunnels weeks after the accident. Crews eventually abandoned the effort, sealing the shaft with concrete. In April 2025, weeks after Larson vanished, motion sensors placed near the entrance began triggering at night. The audio they captured contained low rumbles, punctuated by faint metallic clicks. The rhythm was constant, precise. Technicians analyzing the sound confirmed it wasn't natural rock movement. The pattern repeated every hour on the hour. Locals began visiting again, some out of curiosity, others out of superstition. A hiker named Melissa Grant recorded the knocking from outside the barricade. Her video, taken at 2 p.m. on April 22, shows her standing at the mouth of the shaft. The knocks are audible 3, then 1. When she steps closer, the ground vibrates slightly, dust lifting from the stones. She retreats, breathing heavily. The video ends with her saying softly, "It's under me." Geologists returning to the site in May noted strange temperature fluctuations inside the sealed shaft. Readings dropped by 10 degrees Celsius within minutes, then returned to normal. Magnetic instruments drifted erratically, and one researcher's compass spun twice before freezing. They withdrew, citing safety concerns. Later that month, a ranger inspecting the barricade found a new boot print in the dust fresh, size 11, identical to the one captured on Larson's camera. It faced the wall, no footprints led away. In June, seismic monitoring equipment along the Gentry Ridge logged faint vibrations each night, between 2 and 2:10 a.m. The signals originated directly beneath shaft 12 and matched the frequency of human hammering on iron 3 strikes, pause, 1. After 6 nights, the vibrations stopped completely. The state later sealed the entrance with reinforced concrete. Still, residents of Helper say that when the mountain freezes in winter, you can hear faint tapping through the ice. Some describe it as echoing from deep below, others say it comes from the ground right beneath their boots. A field report filed in July 2025 lists final observations. Area stable, no surface collapse. Unexplained acoustic activity persists. Recommend monitoring during freeze-thaw cycles. In the margin, a handwritten note adds, "Knocking heard again at 0212, origin unclear, felt through soles. No trace of Brian Larson has ever been found." His family keeps his recovered audio recorder sealed in a case. When played back, the final seconds reveal a sound barely audible beneath the static of breath, then 3 knocks, then 1. The pattern continues faintly, even after the device should have stopped recording, as if the mountain itself had taken over the rhythm. To this day, hikers who stray too close to Gentry Mountain claim they feel small tremors underfoot, almost like a heartbeat. Locals tell newcomers not to answer the sound, no matter how near it seems. They say that every few years, the mountain opens a little more, just long enough for one person to step forward and join the work still echoing below. The disappearance at Mirror Lake. Mirror Lake sits high in the Uinta Mountains, nearly 10,000 feet above sea level. The air there is thin, cold, even in summer, and so still that the water reflects every cloud and tree line like polished glass. Locals say the lake earned its name because its surface shows more than reflection, it shows what isn't there. In July 2025, a group of campers arrived from Provo to spend the weekend fishing. There were 4 of them: Eli Turner, 28, his fiancée, Marla, and 2 friends, the brothers James and Cole Parson. They set up near the east bank where the water is deepest, an area popular for sunrise photos. By dusk, the lake had turned silver under the moon, calm enough that the stars looked anchored in the water. That's when Eli noticed something odd. His reflection wasn't matching his movement. Marla recalled later that he bent to fill a cup and froze. She asked what was wrong. He said quietly, "I moved my hand, but it didn't." They laughed at first, assuming it was wind distortion. But the air was still. Eli waved both arms, his reflection delayed by a heartbeat, then turned its head slightly to the right, an angle he hadn't made. They all leaned over to look. Each saw something different. Marla said the reflections' faces were blurred, almost too smooth. Cole said his own reflection blinked twice while he hadn't blinked at all. Only James saw nothing unusual. He told them to stop joking, turned away, and began tending the campfire. The group decided to sleep early. Sometime after midnight, Marla woke to ripples on the lake. She saw Eli standing near the water's edge, motionless. When she called his name, he didn't turn. His reflection, however, did, its face shifting slightly toward her, while his real body stayed still. She described the reflected eyes as open too wide. Then, without sound, Eli stepped forward. The surface broke once, quietly. Marla screamed, waking the brothers. They rushed out with flashlights, but the water was calm again. No splash, no bubbles. The shoreline mud showed one set of footprints ending at the waterline. No others led away. They called 911 from the trailhead an hour later. Search teams arrived by dawn. Divers spent 2 days scouring the lake, visibility near zero. No body surfaced, no clothing, no gear. A sonar scan showed nothing on the bottom but silt. Authorities treated it as an accidental drowning, yet what unsettled investigators were the photographs left behind. Marla's phone contained several taken moments before Eli vanished. In each, his reflection lagged slightly caught mid-turn, eyes pointed elsewhere. In one image, the reflection stands still, while the real Eli is blurred in motion. The case would have ended there, but in August, 2 hikers visiting the same area reported hearing someone calling for help across the lake. When they looked, they saw a man standing knee-deep in the shallows. They waved. The figure waved back, but his reflection did not. The hikers crossed to the opposite shore and found only footprints leading into the water. Park rangers, aware of the July incident, ran further sonar sweeps. During one scan, at 2:14 a.m., the sonar registered a vertical anomaly rising halfway from the lakebed, thin as a human body but too cold for organic matter. It hovered for several seconds, then faded. Later that month, the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources installed a temperature and vibration buoy in the center of the lake. The buoy recorded irregular pulses, 5 per second, each time the moon reached its highest point. The pulses occurred at 19.6 Hz, identical to the frequency captured in earlier wilderness anomalies across the state. On September 3, a wildlife photographer named Rachel Kim camped near the same bank. She set her camera to time-lapse overnight, capturing long exposures of the lake under starlight. At 2:11 a.m., one frame shows the surface shimmering unnaturally ripples, forming concentric rings without wind. In the next, a faint figure appears. In the reflection, only no corresponding body above. The figure stands at the shoreline, one hand reaching toward the lens. When enlarged, the face in the reflection resembles Eli Turner. The timestamp is exactly 2 months after his disappearance. Scientists from the University of Utah examined the footage and confirmed no evidence of digital alteration. They suggested optical interference caused by thin fog, but weather logs that night recorded clear conditions and zero humidity variation. Marla returned once, escorted by rangers, to place flowers near the bank. She refused to look at the water. One ranger later noted that as she spoke her farewell, faint ripples formed near the center, no wind, no sound, just motion, expanding outward like a slow breath. Mirror Lake has been the site of 9 drownings since 1980. all ruled accidental. Yet several share peculiar details: no struggle, no splashing, no recovery of remains. Campers speak of the lake's stillness as unnatural, a mirror that keeps what it shows. Some claim that on calm nights, when you stand alone by the water, your reflection will not mimic you immediately. It will hesitate, as though deciding whether to stay behind. Rangers now close the east shore at dusk. A laminated sign reads, "Unstable terrain, no access after dark," but hikers still come. They whisper that when the moonlight is right, the reflections around the lake ripple independently, small waves bending against gravity, forming faint human outlines just beneath the surface. A ranger's final entry from October 2025 summarizes the most recent inspection. Lake stable, no movement observed. Temperature dropped suddenly at 0213. Heard sound like breath on glass. Reflections in water appeared delayed by approx. 0.5 seconds. Beneath the note, a short line written in pencil reads, "He's still there." Mirror Lake remains open for day visitors, yet few linger once the wind dies. As the light fades, the surface turns from silver to black, and those who look too long say they begin to see faces not theirs, but watching back, waiting for one movement out of sync. The lights over Goblin Valley. Goblin Valley lies in the San Rafael Desert of central Utah, a maze of eroded stone figures called hoodoos that resemble distorted faces. The valley is known for its silence: no rivers, no wind strong enough to carry sound. At night, the rock pillars cast long shadows that seem to move even when nothing does. For years, it was only a curiosity of geology. Then, in late 2025, the lights began. The first sighting came on September 12, when a park volunteer named Michael Pratt was conducting a night patrol. Around 2:30 a.m., he noticed a faint orange glow weaving between the rock formations. He assumed it was another camper's lantern until it rose 10 feet off the ground and split into 3 spheres. They moved in a slow spiral, tracing the contours of the valley floor. Pratt reported that they were perfectly silent, no hum, no engine, and emitted enough light to illuminate the hoodoos in a dull copper hue. After 30 seconds, the lights shot straight upward and disappeared into the clear sky. Rangers dismissed it as a trick of reflection or a drone, but 2 days later, another group witnessed the same phenomenon. A family camping near the Goblin's Lair Trail recorded 2 lights drifting above the valley. In the footage, they hover, merge into one, and then fade without a trace. The video was analyzed and found to contain no sound distortion or mechanical flicker. Throughout September and October, reports multiplied. Some described single spheres the size of basketballs. Others saw clusters forming geometric shapes before dispersing. Rangers began night patrols, equipped with infrared cameras. On October 14, they recorded a faint heat bloom hovering 30 meters above the ground, temperature difference of exactly 12 degrees Celsius from ambient air. No physical object was visible. One ranger, Alex Mendoza, later described the experience in his incident log. "The light moved as if responding to us. When I stepped left, it drifted left. When I raised my hand, it brightened slightly, felt more like it was watching than drifting." Scientists from the University of Utah were invited to conduct an electromagnetic survey. On October 20, they deployed magnetometers across the valley floor. At 2:11 a.m., the instruments detected a pulse at 19.6 Hz, identical to those documented in other unexplained Utah wilderness events. The frequency persisted for exactly 43 seconds, the same duration as the whistle recorded years earlier at Red Hollow Canyon. At that precise moment, a camera facing west captured 3 luminous spheres emerging from behind the rocks. The lights moved in a perfect triangle, maintaining equal distance while gliding silently toward the ridge. They then climbed vertically and vanished in less than a second. The research team returned the following week to collect samples from the area where the lights had appeared. The sand there was slightly magnetized, darkened in circular patches. The composition showed silica fused by brief, intense heat, but no trace of chemical residue or radiation. In November, new witnesses emerged. A photographer named Hannah Cole captured a long-exposure image showing the valley illuminated by multiple streaks of light curving between hoodoos. The paths were too precise to be random, forming what appeared to be intersecting arcs. In one frame, the light passed directly behind a rock pillar and reappeared on the other side with no shadow interruption, as though it had phased through solid stone. Locals began calling them the Watchers. Campers described faint static in their ears moments before the lights appeared. followed by pressure in the chest and silence, complete silence, as if the desert stopped breathing. In late November, 2 hikers vanished after reporting the phenomenon over radio. Their transmission, recorded by Park Dispatch at 11:42 p.m., contains the following. "We see them again 3, no, 4, hovering low, just above the ground. They're moving toward us." A burst of static follows, then the sound of footsteps. The last words are faint. It's right in front of, before the signal cuts. A search the next morning found their campsite intact. Footprints led outward into the valley and stopped abruptly in open sand. Helicopter sweeps found no trace of the hikers. Their phones, recovered from camp, each contained the same partial video, a faint glow approaching, flickering, then total black. Park authorities closed Goblin Valley to overnight visitors for the remainder of the year. An incident summary, dated December 3, lists unidentified luminous phenomena, possible plasma discharge, or atmospheric refraction. Yet none of the scientific equipment recorded temperature or humidity changes consistent with such explanation. When the park reopened in January 2026, the lights returned. Witnesses described them as smaller but faster, darting between formations and vanishing whenever direct light touched them. One hiker claimed a sphere followed him for nearly half a mile, always staying 20 feet ahead. He said it moved, like something thinking about where to go next. The latest instrument readings show the same recurring frequency, 19.6 Hz, pulsing through the ground for short intervals. Geologists now believe the valley may contain mineral deposits capable of storing static charge, though that would not explain the synchronized motion or the aerial trajectory. A ranger's March 2026 log concludes simply, 3-4 hours, 3 lights, seen rising vertically from center of valley, duration 43 seconds, no sound, ground warm after. Today, visitors still camp there, despite warnings. Some bring cameras hoping to capture proof. Others come just to see the glow in person. Those who have say it feels less like seeing light and more like being seen by it, watched from within the silence, as if the stone figures themselves had opened their eyes. After each sighting, the ground cools, the desert returns to stillness, and the air resumes its long, slow exhale. But those who stay until morning claim that when the sun first touches the hoodoos, faint circular impressions appear in the sand like footprints made by something that was never really walking. The vanished survey team at 9 Mile Canyon. 9 Mile Canyon runs east of Price, Utah, a narrow, twisting gorge carved through layers of sandstone and shale. For over a century, archaeologists have called it the world's longest art gallery, home to more than 10,000 ancient petroglyphs carved by the Fremont culture nearly 1,000 years ago. The walls show hunters, spirals, and shapes that look almost human, but not quite. In 2024, a 3-person survey team entered the canyon to document erosion damage to several panels. None of them returned. The team consisted of Dr. Elaine Carr, 36, an archaeologist from the University of Utah, field technician David Holbrook, 28, and volunteer assistant Luis Ortega, 24. They left Price on May 11, driving a white utility truck loaded with scanners and solar-powered Jeeps equipment. Their work was part of a Bureau of Land Management contract to digitize petroglyphs threatened by flash flooding and vandalism. They signed in at the ranger station that morning, marking their intended survey grid as sites 7 through 10 near Cottonwood Draw. At 6:42 p.m., Carr sent a final message to her supervisor. "We found additional carvings near Site 9, unrecorded in 2009 survey. Figures appear recently exposed." Finishing notes, camping overnight. The following morning, the station received no check-in. By afternoon, a search was launched. Their truck was found parked neatly beside the canyon road, engine off, doors open. Inside were 3 packs, a still-charged satellite phone, and an open notebook. The last entry read, "Panels extend east wall." One figure seems altered surface fresh. The handwriting trailed off mid-sentence. Rescue crews followed a set of footprints leading about a mile downstream toward an isolated rock alcove. There, they found the team's equipment tripods, cameras, and a ground scanner arranged in a semicircle facing the canyon wall. The scanner's battery was drained, its internal clock frozen at 1946 hours. The sandstone surface before them displayed a single new panel. It was carved in the same style as the surrounding Fremont art, but the lines were sharp and unweathered. The figure depicted 3 human shapes standing beneath an arch, each with raised arms. Their proportions matched adult height, and the tools carved beside them resembled modern tripods. The ground around the site was undisturbed except for 3 partial footprints in the dust, leading toward the wall and ending there. When investigators tried to photograph the panel, the images repeatedly failed to store. Memory cards corrupted instantly or showed only black frames. The few usable photos contained visual noise horizontal bands at regular intervals. The frequency of those bands, when analyzed, was exactly 19.6 Hz. The search continued for 12 days. Helicopters scanned the canyon floor, dogs were brought in, and drones mapped every branch of the gorge. No bodies, clothing, or equipment were found beyond that alcove. A nearby rancher reported hearing metal tapping 2 nights after the disappearance, like hammer on stone, though the canyon was empty. On May 25, a second team of archaeologists visited the site. They noted that the newly discovered petroglyph seemed to have changed slightly since its first documentation. The 3 carved figures now appeared to have one arm lowered, as though the artist had returned to alter the pose. The grooves remained sharp, still free of lichen or weathering. LiDAR scans of the wall revealed a narrow cavity behind the panel, roughly 6 feet deep and shaped like a half dome. When a small camera probe was inserted, the feed displayed the interior surface covered in fine red dust. In that dust lay 3 human-sized impressions, perfectly outlined, side by side. The cavity emitted no measurable air current, yet the probe microphone recorded a faint pulsing hum from within a gain centered near 19.6 Hz. After that discovery, the site was sealed and placed under federal restriction pending further analysis. The following week, a team of conservators returned to install protective barriers. To their surprise, the petroglyphs no longer matched the photographs from earlier in the month. The 3 figures had shifted again now, with arms at their sides, and a faint pattern resembling clothing or straps across their torsos. In June, a bureau memo circulated internally. It summarized the situation in 3 lines. Surface carvings show evidence of change despite stabilization. Recommend halting fieldwork until natural explanation confirmed. The case was never publicly released. Unofficially, several colleagues of Dr. Carr admitted she had expressed unease before the expedition. 2 days prior to departure, she emailed a fellow researcher writing, "Hearing odd resonance when I test the scanners near sandstone. Low hum under threshold equipment. Thinks it's signal." The email timestamp was 3:14 a.m. In late summer, a ranger passing through Cottonwood Draw noticed something else. The once smooth alcove now showed additional carvings nearby, small lines resembling survey markers. They were precise, evenly spaced, cut with a modern tool. No one admitted making them. The ranger photographed the markings before reporting them. When analysts compared the positions, they discovered the lines matched the last known GPS coordinates of the survey team's scanner tripods. When the ranger returned a month later, the markings were gone, replaced by shallow depressions filled with dust. Visitors to the canyon sometimes claim they still hear tapping near Site 9-3 short strikes, then a pause. Sound engineers who tested the area in September found weak vibrations through the rock at 19.6 Hz, strongest near the panel, depicting the 3 figures. When amplified, the signal resembled a repeating phrase or breath, something rhythmic, too slow to be language. Today, the alcove remains closed to the public. Official documents list the case as unresolved disappearance, environmental hazards possible. Yet the current Bureau map of 9 Mile Canyon includes a new annotation at the edge of Site 9, Panel K Fremont period, discovered 2024, 3 anthropomorphic figures. Condition, active. Rangers stationed nearby avoid that section after dark. They say the air feels charged there, and sometimes the wall seems to shimmer, as if light is bending around something not entirely visible. A few admit they've glimpsed new carvings appearing overnight, faint outlines of movement etched into the stone. None of them last long by morning. They fade into the rock, leaving only smooth surfaces and the lingering sense that someone or something is still working quietly in the canyon, continuing a record no longer carved by human hands. The camp that reappeared at Horseshoe Bend. The Horseshoe Bend of the Colorado River is one of Utah's most photographed landmarks, a perfect oxbow of red canyon circling still blue water. Each year, thousands stand on its rim for the same view. But few venture down to the river itself, where the cliffs close in and radio contact vanishes. In late spring 2025, a group of kayakers descended that stretch for an overnight trip. What they saw between the bend's walls would lead investigators to reopen 3 old missing persons cases, once thought resolved. The group consisted of 5 experienced paddlers, brothers Nathan and Mark Peters, their friend and photographer Chloe Reed, and a couple, Aaron and Dana Bell. They launched from Lee's Ferry on May 23, intending to camp at the inner curve of Horseshoe Bend. The site had a small sandy bank known for safe landing. At 5:40 p.m, Chloe's camera recorded their first approach. The footage shows sunlight reflecting off a small camp already set up onshore 2 dome tents, a cooler and folding chairs. A white tarp flapped lightly in the wind. They assumed another group had arrived first. Voices seemed to carry faintly across the water, but when they pulled in, the voices stopped. The sand was unmarked by footprints. The tents were zipped, yet when Nathan tapped one gently, it collapsed inward, deflating into the ground as though filled with air instead of structure. Chloe described it later. It didn't fall, it just sank. Confused, they moved downriver to another site and set up their own camp. That night, around 2 a.m, Aaron woke to what sounded like paddles striking water nearby. When he looked out, he saw faint lantern light at the original site upriver. The same white tarp rippled in the wind. In his words, it looked exactly the same as before. Same chairs, same layout, but we knew it wasn't there when we left. At dawn, they paddled back. The shore was empty again. But this time, near where the tents had been, the sand showed shallow depressions forming concentric circles, as if something had pressed from beneath. Nathan photographed the scene. In one image, the light reveals faint outlines resembling human footprints arranged in a spiral. Later that morning, as they rounded the bend's far side, they noticed the same camp again upriver, visible from a distance, positioned at a bank they had already passed. The arrangement was identical. 2 tents, white tarp, cooler, no people. Like a loop, Chloe said. Their Jeep's log, verified by the National Park Service, showed no doubling back. They had followed the river continuously downstream. The camp's reappearance contradicted both distance and terrain. When they reached Glen Canyon Takeout, rangers met them after receiving a call from Chloe reporting visual duplication. The rangers initially suspected heat mirage or exhaustion, but the photographs told another story. The timestamps showed the same camp photographed 4 hours apart from 2 distinct coordinates, 14 miles apart. The shadows in each image fell in different directions, consistent with real structures, not reflection. In June, investigators returned with the group to retrace the route. At the first site, they discovered a buried object, a metal frame, half buried in sand, rusted and warped. It matched the shape of an old folding camp chair. A park historian identified it as a style discontinued in 1997. Nearby, they unearthed fragments of nylon tent fabric fused with mineral deposits, aged at least 20 years. When compared with missing persons records, an old case surfaced. In 2002, a 3-person rafting group had vanished in the same section. Their camp was later found intact but empty, as if they had simply stepped away. No bodies or equipment were ever recovered. The Park Service brought in sonar imaging to survey beneath the riverbank. 2 cavities appeared at the coordinates where the modern campers had first seen the phantom tent's circular voids roughly 10 feet below the surface, filled with silt. The shape of one cavity matched the dimensions of a tent. Acoustic sensors placed at the site recorded faint pulses every 43 seconds, identical to the pattern observed at Red Hollow and Goblin Valley. Frequency 19.6 Hz. In July, a river ranger camping alone for monitoring purposes wrote in his nightly log, 2:12 a.m, heard paddles striking water, shone light toward opposite shore, saw reflection of tents on water, but not on land, looked away, looked back, gone, sound stopped. When he reviewed his camera footage later, the reflection was visible 2 tents and a tarp, yet nothing appeared on the actual shoreline above. The reflection rippled once and then faded. Further study of Chloe Reed's original photos revealed an overlooked detail. The tents in the images were of an older model, no longer produced. The cooler bore a logo from a defunct outfitter, last active in the late 1990 seconds. In one frame, a faint figure seemed to be standing at the water's edge, half-formed, translucent, the shape dissolving into the light. No explanation satisfied the investigators. Atmospheric inversion, mirage, and human error were all cited but none aligned with the physical evidence, the buried artifacts, the magnetic anomalies, and the identical pattern of time and frequency observed across other Utah wilderness events. In August, the Park Service quietly installed motion-triggered cameras along the Horseshoe Bend shoreline. Over 3 weeks, they recorded 3 separate nights of anomalies: faint lights moving across the water, flashes near the sand, and brief appearances of tent outlines visible for only seconds before vanishing. On August 19, the equipment captured a final event lasting exactly 43 seconds. 3 faint silhouettes, 2 upright, 1 seated, appeared beside a tarp that glowed faintly white. Then all light disappeared, and the sand shifted inward as though the ground had exhaled. Rangers inspecting the area afterward found the ground unusually warm to the touch and soft beneath the crust, as if hollow. A small patch of sand near the waterline remained damp, though it hadn't rained in weeks. In the center of that patch, a single footprint pointed toward the river. The official incident summary lists the cause as optical reflection or atmospheric anomaly. The report closes with a sentence written in smaller font. Field instruments again recorded infrasound activity at 19.6 Hz, duration 43 seconds. Today, the stretch of river remains open to boaters. Visitors often report glimpsing distant lights along the inner curve, where no camps are permitted. Guides advise newcomers to avoid landing there after dark. They say the place remembers itself too well that every now and then something old surfaces, repeating what was once real, holding its form just long enough to be seen before the water folds it away again. The wilderness of Utah remains still, the canyons keep their silence, and the sand covers what it must. Each case ends the same way: footprints fading, voices cut short, lights that vanish before they can be explained. What connects them is not seen but felt, an undercurrent running beneath sound, stone, and distance. People come searching for answers, and the land waits unchanged. There are names left on maps, reports filed, and photographs without context. The rest is only air moving quietly where someone once stood. Utah doesn't give back what it takes. It only echoes. If you want to hear the next echo, stay with us. Join us as we continue exploring the places that remember more than they reveal.